Today, we're diving into a legal battle unfolding in Idaho that, honestly, it feels like it's ripped straight from a screenplay. You've got one homeowner, representing himself, going up against a huge corporate foreclosure machine. And believe me, how this all shakes out could really make us rethink what fairness even means in our justice system.
Wow. Just listen to that quote. That single sentence from the homeowner's appeal to the Idaho Supreme Court cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? It's a pretty explosive allegation that the very rules of the legal system are being turned into a weapon. So let's unpack how we even got here.
At its core, this is that classic story, right? It's David versus Goliath. One person fighting for their home against a massive, well-oiled corporate machine. I mean, just look at this matchup. It really paints a picture of the insane power imbalance we're talking about. On one side, you have Jeremy Bass. He's the homeowner fighting to save his family's home with, what he has. On the other side, a whole network of venture capital-backed LLCs, and they've got a legal powerhouse in their corner. It just feels like an impossible fight right from the get-go.
Okay, so this is a really key term you have to understand for this whole story. Pro se. It's a fancy way of saying Mr. Bass is acting as his own lawyer. Think about that. He's the one filing motions, making arguments in front of a judge, and trying to navigate this labyrinth of legal procedure, all stuff that lawyers train for years to master. This fact is absolutely central to everything that happens next. So who exactly is this Goliath? Well, the buyers are a couple of LLCs out of Utah, DPW Enterprises and Mountain Prime 2018. But the real muscle, the legal firepower, comes from their law firm, Halliday, Watkins, and Mann. And listen, these aren't just any lawyers. This is a fourth-generation firm that literally specializes in foreclosures for the country's biggest banks. They are absolute experts in this game.
Now, this whole firestorm was ignited by a single event, the foreclosure auction of the Bass home. But as you're about to see, whether this auction was actually fair, well, that is a huge question mark. So the date is February 29th, 2024. That's the day Jeremy Bass's home was sold on the courthouse steps. On the surface, it probably looked like any other foreclosure sale. But the real question is, what was going on behind the curtain? Was this really a fair and public auction as required by law? According to Bass, it was anything but fair. He alleges that there was communication before the auction between the trustee and the buyers to basically fix the opening bid. And get this, the winning bidders, who were the only bidders, they showed up with checks already printed out for a very specific amount that wasn't public knowledge. And the kicker? Bass himself was standing right there on the courthouse steps with a sign protesting that the whole thing was rigged. Now, facing all of this, Bass didn't just roll over. No way. Instead, he launched this incredible counterattack using a series of really creative legal strategies he called his legal shields. Okay, so shield number one, a lease agreement. This was a really slick move. Right before the auction, Bass signed a totally legal, binding lease with a tenant. The whole strategy was to use a federal law, the Protecting Tenants at Foreclosure Act, which basically says that new owners have to honor any existing leases. It was a brilliant move designed to stop an immediate eviction dead in its tracks. And he didn't stop there. Shield number two was something called a custodial agreement. He made the same tenant the legal custodian of all his personal properties still in the house. This meant the new owners couldn't just haul his stuff out to the curb. They now had a legal responsibility for it, which just tangled things up for them even more. So you see how this was like a 1-2 punch, right? The lease protected the person living in the home. The custodial agreement protected all this stuff inside the home. All of a sudden, this wasn't a simple eviction case anymore. Bass had turned it into a complex, messy, and expensive legal fight that brought that big foreclosure machine to a screeching halt. Okay, so let's follow this into the courtroom, because this is where the whole fight pivots. It stops being about who owns the property and starts being about the rules of the legal game itself. So the other side files for something called summary judgment. It's basically a legal shortcut to win without a trial. And just look how fast this all went down. October 15th, Bass files his defense. Just 3 days later, the company's lawyers reply, but they sneak in new evidence. So Bass scrambles and fires back a response on the 21st. But the very next day, in the hearing, the judge just refuses to even look at it. And that brings up a huge question for any justice system that claims to be fair, right?
What are you supposed to do? What happens when your opponent drops new evidence in their very last filing and the rules give you literally no official way to answer it?
The court's answer was, well, it was simple and it was absolutely devastating. According to Idaho's rules of procedure, there is no such thing as a reply to a reply. And just like that, Bass's final argument, his only shot at countering that new evidence, was tossed out on a technicality. He was, for all intents and purposes, silenced. And look, it's not just Bass who sees this as a major problem. A specialist in civil procedure, Marcus Bennett, calls this exact scenario a procedural dead end. It's a trap in the system that's especially dangerous for folks representing themselves because they're expected to know these complex rules just as well as a high-priced lawyer. Now let's talk about the human cost of all this, because it has been staggering. This first number, $10,500, that's just what Bass has had to pay out of his own pocket for things like rent and storage while he fights to get his own home back. And then there's this number, $108,000. That is the estimated value of Bass's own time, the thousands of hours he has poured into fighting this battle pro se, time he wasn't able to spend working his actual job. It's just a raw look at the incredible personal sacrifice it takes to stand up to this kind of machine all by yourself. And so that all brings us to where things stand right now. The lower court ruled against him, so Bass has taken his fight to the next level, the highest court in the entire state. Yeah, this is not just some local dispute anymore. By taking this to the Idaho Supreme Court, the case has become a major test for the state's entire foreclosure system. The decision here could set a huge precedent for the rights of every single homeowner in Idaho. The Supreme Court isn't just looking at the details of one eviction. They're being forced to grapple with these enormous, fundamental questions about what justice even is. Like, should a regular person be held to the exact same standard as a legal expert? Can procedural rules be used as a shield to hide potential fraud from a court? And what does due process really, truly mean when the fight is this lopsided? And that really forces us to end with a tough question, one that gets to the very heart of this entire conflict. When the rules of the game themselves seem to undermine the entire point of justice, who is supposed to win?